The ice storm howled across the frozen surface of Vareth 7 like a beast that would never grow tired. And Marcus Cole pressed his face against the window of the medical bay as he watched the white chaos swallow everything in sight. He was 26 years old then, a field medic stationed at a mining colony that felt more like a prison than a workplace. And he had seen enough frostbite and mining accidents to last him 3 lifetimes. The colony lights flickered as another gust of wind slammed against the walls. And somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to wail. "Cole!" shouted Sergeant Briggs from the doorway, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Something crashed about 2 kilometers north of here, and Command wants you to check if anyone survived." Marcus grabbed his medical pack without hesitation because that was simply who he was. The kind of man who ran toward danger when others ran away. The trek through the storm nearly killed him twice. But he found the wreckage half buried in a snowdrift. And what he discovered inside changed his life forever. The escape pod was small and damaged beyond repair, its metal skin torn open like paper. And inside lay a creature unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. She was insectoid in nature with 4 arms and 2 legs. Her body covered in plates of dark purple chitin that gleamed even in the dim light of his flashlight. And her face was almost human in its structure, except for the large compound eyes that reflected his light back at him like shattered. Mira's blood leaked from cracks in her armor, a strange blue fluid that steamed when it touched the cold air. And Marcus could see that several of her chitin plates had been shattered inward as if someone had tried very hard to kill her. She was dying. And she was young, perhaps no older than a human teenager if he had to guess. Marcus knelt beside her and pressed his fingers to what he hoped was her neck, searching for a pulse, and when he found one it was weak and fading fast. "Can you hear me?" he asked her softly, knowing she probably could not understand him. Her compound eyes flickered open and focused on his face. And in that moment Marcus saw something he recognized instantly, despite all the differences between their species. He saw fear, saw a child who did not want to die. "I'm going to help you," he told her as he opened his medical pack. "I do not know if you can understand me, but I'm not going to let you die out here in the cold." Getting her back to the colony was a nightmare that Marcus would remember for the rest of his days. Dragging her through the storm on an improvised sled while the wind tried to knock him down with every step. When he finally stumbled through the airlock with her unconscious body, Sergeant Briggs and the colony administrator were waiting for him with expressions that made his stomach turn cold. "That is a Vethkari," said Administrator Chun with disgust dripping from every word. "They are isolationists who hate every other species in the galaxy. And if her people find out we have her, they will burn this colony to ash. She is dying," Marcus replied as he laid her on a medical table. "She needs surgery now or she will not survive the hour. Then let her die," Chun said coldly. "Or better yet, turn her over to intelligence and let them extract whatever secret she has in that alien brain of hers." Marcus looked at the administrator with eyes that had suddenly grown very hard. And something in his gaze made Chun take a step backward. "No," Marcus said simply. "That is not your decision to make, medic. Tonight it is." What followed was the longest night of Marcus Cole's young life as he operated on a creature whose anatomy he did not understand, using tools that were never designed for her species. He worked by instinct and desperation, sealing wounds and setting broken plates back into place while she drifted in and out of consciousness. Several times, he thought he had lost her, but each time her heart started beating again, as if she refused to give up. He talked to her throughout the night even though she could not understand him, telling her about his home on Earth, and his mother who had taught him that every life had value, and his dream of one day becoming a real doctor. "You are going to live," he told her again and again like a prayer. "I will not let you die here." By morning the storm had passed and the alien girl was stable. and Marcus collapsed into a chair beside her bed completely. Exhausted, she woke 3 days later with Marcus sitting beside her as he had been every moment since the surgery. Her compound eyes studied him for a long time before she spoke. And when she did, her voice was like music made of whispers. "Why?" she asked in broken Terran standard that she must have learned from listening to the colony broadcasts. "Because you needed help," Marcus answered. "I am Vethkari, and your kind and mine are not friends. You are a person who is hurt and alone." And that was enough for me. She stared at him with those strange, beautiful eyes. And Marcus could see that his words had confused her deeply. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus nursed her back to health while hiding her from the rest of the colony, bringing her food and medicine, and sitting with her for hours as she grew stronger. Her name was Saritha, she told him, and she was a princess of the Vethkari Empire who had fled an assassination attempt. During a bloody war for succession, Marcus did not care about her title or her politics, because to him she was simply a young girl who needed kindness. When the Vethkari retrieval ship finally arrived, Saritha stood at the airlock and turned to face the human who had saved her life. "I do not have words for what you have done," she said softly. "You do not need words," Marcus replied with a gentle smile. She reached out and took his hands in hers, studying them carefully, as if memorizing every line in callus. And then she pressed her forehead against his palms in a gesture of profound meaning. "I will never forget you, Marcus Cole," she whispered. "I will never forget your hands." Then she was gone, and Marcus returned to his ordinary life, believing he would never see her again. 20 years had passed as that frozen night on Verith 7, and the galaxy had changed in ways that Marcus Cole could never have imagined. Stood on the bridge of the battleship, relentless, and stared at the tactical display with tired eyes that had seen too much war and too much death. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his face carried the scars of a dozen battles. But his hands remained steady, as they always had been. Rear Admiral Marcus Cole, I called him now, and the title felt like a weight he had never asked to carry. "Admiral," said his executive officer, Commander Sarah Chun. "Intelligence has updated the enemy force projections, and the news is not good." Marcus nodded slowly, because the news had not been good for months. Not since the Vethkari Dominion had begun its terrible expansion across the stars. The Vethkari had changed since his encounter with that young princess so long ago, transforming from a fractured collection of warring houses into a unified empire that spanned 3 galactic arms. They had a single ruler now, an empress who had crushed all opposition and forged her people into the most feared military force the galaxy had ever seen. She was called Saritha the Undying, and the intelligence reports described her as brilliant and ruthless and utterly without mercy. Marcus had read her name 100 times without ever making the connection to the dying girl he had once saved. Because how could that frightened child have become the monster that now threatened all of humanity? Her title and her regnal name had hidden the truth from him, and he had simply assumed that his Saritha was long dead, like so many others who had been caught in the Vethkari succession wars. The Empress does not negotiate, the diplomats had warned when the war began. She does not accept surrender, and she does not show mercy to her enemies. Colony after colony had fallen to the Vethkari swarm, their bioships darkening the skies of human worlds before unleashing devastation beyond imagination. The Galactic Compact, a fragile alliance of species that had banded together for mutual protection, was crumbling under the pressure of the assault. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction, and Marcus Cole had been given the impossible task of holding the line at Cauldrus Prime. "How many ships do we have?" he asked quietly. 47 combat-capable vessels," Commander Chun replied. "The Vethkari Armada approaching our position numbers over 200, and the civilian population? 3 million souls on the planet's surface. And we have evacuation transports for perhaps half of them. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and let the weight of those numbers settle into his bones. 3 million lives depending on him. And he did not have the ships or the firepower to save them all. Begin the evacuation immediately, he ordered. Priority goes to children and families. And I want every transport we have running continuous trips to the jump point. The Vethkari will arrive before we can complete the evacuation. Admiral, then we will buy them time, Marcus said with a calm that he did not feel. Every hour we hold the line is another 1,000 civilians who escape. The next 3 days were a blur of frantic activity as the evacuation proceeded while the Vethkari Armada drew closer and closer. Marcus slept only in brief moments stolen between tactical meetings and supply conferences. And even then his dreams were haunted by the faces of those he could not save when the enemy finally arrived. The sky above Caldris Prime filled with ships that looked like living things, their hulls covered in organic armor that pulsed with an inner light. All ships report ready. Admiral, Commander Chun announced. Marcus looked at the faces of his bridge crew and saw fear there, but also determination. And he felt a surge of pride in these brave men and women who had chosen to stand with him. This is Admiral Cole to all ships, he said into the fleet-wide channel. I will not lie to you about our odds today, because you deserve better than false hope from me. He paused and took a deep breath before continuing. We are outnumbered and outgunned, and many of us will not survive what comes next. But every minute we fight is another minute for our people to escape. Every ship we destroy is one less ship that can threaten our families and our homes. And every act of courage today will echo through history. Fight with everything you have. And know that I am proud to serve alongside each and every one of you. The channel fell silent. And then a voice crackled back through the speakers. For humanity, someone said. For humanity, echoed another voice, and then another, until the cry filled the communication channels. Like a roar of defiance, Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, but he blinked them away because there was no time for emotion now. All ships, he commanded, engage the enemy. The Battle of Caldris Prime began with fire and thunder as human warships threw themselves against the Vethkari swarm. Marcus watched the tactical display as his ships fought and died, their icons winking out one by one while they took enemy vessels with them into the darkness. The humans fought with a ferocity that surprised even their enemies, refusing to retreat and refusing to surrender, even when their hulls were breached and their crews were dying. For every human ship lost, 3 Vethkari vessels fell. A ratio that should have been impossible given the difference in numbers and technology, but humans had always been stubborn creatures who refused to accept defeat. And today that stubbornness would cost the Vethkari dearly. Hours passed and the battle raged on. And Marcus made decision after decision that sent good people to their deaths while buying precious minutes for the evacuation. Below, his heart broke with every loss, but his hands never trembled and his voice never wavered when the Relentless finally took a critical hit and began to fall toward the planet's surface. Marcus did not abandon his post. All hands prepare for impact, he announced calmly. And know that today we have shown the galaxy what humanity truly is. The ship screamed as it entered the atmosphere. And Marcus Cole closed his eyes and thought of a young alien girl who had once looked at him with fear. He wondered what had become of her, and whether she would have been proud of the man he had tried to be. The Relentless hit the surface of Caldris Prime like a hammer thrown by an angry god. And Marcus Cole survived only because the universe was not yet finished with him. He woke in darkness with blood running down his face and the screams of his crew echoing through the twisted metal corridors around him. Commander Chun, he shouted into the chaos. Chun, report. I am here, Admiral, came her voice from somewhere nearby. Weak but alive. Structural integrity is gone, and we have fires on multiple decks. Marcus pulled himself from the wreckage of his command chair and forced his battered body to move despite the pain that screamed through every muscle. Emergency lights flickered on and revealed a scene of devastation that would have broken a lesser man, with consoles sparking and bodies lying motionless among the debris. But there were survivors too, men and women pulling themselves up and looking to their admiral for guidance. Everyone who can walk, help those who cannot, Marcus ordered. We need to evacuate the ship before the fires reach the ammunition storage. For the next hour, Marcus worked alongside his crew to pull survivors from the wreckage, his hands growing bloody and raw as he dug through twisted metal to reach trapped sailors. He did not think about his rank or his age or his injuries, because there were people who needed him, and that was all that mattered. By the time they escaped the burning hulk of the Relentless, Marcus had saved 37 souls with his own hands. They emerged into a hellscape of smoke and ash. The once beautiful surface of Cauldrus Prime transformed into a battlefield that stretched to every horizon. The sky above was filled with Vethkari, ships that circled like predators waiting for their prey to weaken. And the sound of distant explosions told Marcus that the fighting continued elsewhere on the planet. What are our options? He asked Commander Chun as they crouched behind the cover of a collapsed building. There is a defensive position about 3 kilometers east, she replied after checking her tactical display. Other survivors have gathered there, and they are holding against Vethkari ground forces. Then that is where we go. The journey through the ruined city was a nightmare of burning buildings and enemy patrols. But Marcus led his people through it with a determination that inspired them to keep moving when their bodies begged them to stop. He picked up a rifle from a fallen soldier along the way because an admiral without a ship was just another soldier, and he intended to keep fighting until his last breath. When they finally reached the defensive position, Marcus found a ragged collection of survivors from a dozen different ships, all holding a line against waves of Vethkari shock troops. The aliens came in endless numbers, their chitin armor gleaming as they charged across the open ground with weapons that sprayed deadly energy in every direction. "Admiral on the line," someone shouted, and a cheer went up from the defenders that seemed impossibly loud given their desperate situation. Marcus took his place among them and raised his rifle. And when the next wave came, he fought with the same ferocity he had shown in the void above. Hours passed and the ammunition ran low and the casualties mounted. But the human line did not break. Marcus moved along the defenses, encouraging his people and fighting beside them, his presence giving them strength they did not know they had. "They just keep coming," shouted a young ensign whose face was covered in soot and terror. "Then we just keep fighting," Marcus replied as he dropped another Vethkari with a well-aimed shot. Night fell, and still the battle raged, with the humans holding their position through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Marcus had lost count of how many enemies he had killed and how many friends he had watched die. But he did not allow himself to feel it yet, because there would be time for grief later if he survived. As dawn approached, the Vethkari attack suddenly ceased. The silence that followed was almost more frightening than the battle had been, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he scanned the horizon for any sign of what was coming. "Admiral," Commander Chun said in a voice filled with confusion, "I am receiving a transmission from the Vethkari command ship." "What does it say?" "The Empress wants to speak with you personally, and she has ordered all attacks on our position to stop until she arrives." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat, because this was not how the Vethkari operated, according to every report he had ever read. The Empress did not negotiate, and she did not parley. She simply crushed her enemies and moved on to the next conquest. Why would she want to talk to me? He wondered aloud. "I do not know, Admiral, but her shuttle is already descending toward our position." Marcus watched the sky as a single ornate craft descended through the smoke and ash. its design elegant and deadly, like everything the Vethkari created. His survivors gathered behind him with weapons raised, ready to fight to the death if this proved to be a trap. The shuttle landed 100 meters away, and for a long moment nothing happened. Then the hatch opened and a figure emerged that made Marcus Cole's breath catch in his throat. She was tall and regal, her chitin plates polished to a mirror shine and adorned with gold. That marked her as royalty. Her compound eyes swept across the battlefield, and the ragged human defenders with an expression that Marcus could not read, but there was something familiar about her, something that tugged at memories buried deep in his mind. She walked toward the human line alone, leaving her guards behind with a gesture that seemed to shock them. Every weapon in the defensive position tracked her movement. But she showed no fear as she approached. Marcus stepped forward to meet her, because that was what a leader did, and his tired legs carried him across the scorched ground until he stood face to face with the most powerful being in the galaxy. She stopped just 3 meters away and studied him with those beautiful alien eyes. And in that moment, Marcus finally understood what his heart had known for 20 years. Saretha, he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. The Empress of the Vethkari Dominion stood motionless as the human spoke her name, and something in her ancient eyes flickered like a flame that had never truly died. "I never forgot your hands, human," she murmured in a voice that carried across the silent battlefield. Marcus felt his weapon slip from his fingers as recognition crashed through him like a tidal wave, washing away the war and the death and the years that separated this moment from that frozen night on Vareth 7, the girl he had saved, the frightened child whose wounds he had mended with desperate hands, had become this towering figure of power and conquest. "You survived," he said softly, and the words seemed almost absurd given everything that had happened between their peoples. "Because of you," Saritha replied. "Because a human medic on a worthless ice moon chose mercy when cruelty would have been easier." Behind Marcus, his surviving crew watched the exchange with confusion and disbelief, their weapons still raised against the alien queen who had orchestrated the deaths of millions. Commander Chun stepped forward with her rifle aimed at the Empress, and her voice shook with barely controlled rage. "Admiral, this creature has murdered countless humans, and you speak to her like an old friend." "Lower your weapon, Commander," Marcus ordered without taking his eyes from Saritha. "But Admiral, that is an order." Chun hesitated for a long moment before lowering her rifle, though her eyes remained fixed on the Empress with undisguised hatred. Saritha paid no attention to the human officer because her focus was entirely on Marcus, studying his weathered face as if searching for the young man she had once known. "You have aged," she observed, and there was something almost like sadness in her voice. "Humans do that," Marcus replied with a tired smile. "We are not as durable as your kind. No, you are not. And yet you fight as if you have nothing to lose. We fight because we have everything to lose." The Empress tilted her head in that gesture Marcus remembered from so long ago, the movement that meant she was considering something carefully. "I watched your fleet today," she said. "I watched your ships throw themselves against my armada with no hope of victory, sacrificing themselves so that strangers could escape. That is what humans do," Marcus said simply. "We protect each other. It is magnificent and terrible, and I do not understand it." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her chitin and the way her compound eyes caught the light of the burning city around them. "I have conquered 100 worlds and defeated 1,000 enemies," Saritha continued. "I have built an empire that will last for 10,000 years. And yet I have found no one else like you in all that time." "I am not special," Marcus said. "I am just a man who could not let a child die. That is exactly what makes you special." Marcus Cole. She spoke his name like it was something precious, something she had carried with her through decades of war and bloodshed. Do you know what I thought about when I was bleeding to death in that escape pod? She asked. I thought about how alone I was, and how no one in the galaxy would care if I simply stopped breathing. And then you came. A creature from a species that had no reason to help me, and every reason to let me die. And you chose kindness. Her voice grew thick with emotion that Marcus had not thought the Vethkari capable of feeling. You talked to me through the surgery, even though I could not understand the words. And your voice was the first gentle thing I had heard since my mother died when I was a hatchling. I remember, Marcus said softly. I told you about Earth, and about my family, and about how everything was going to be okay. I did not understand then. But I learned your language later, and I remembered every word. Tears were forming in Marcus's eyes now, and he did not try to hide them. Why are you doing this, Saritha? He asked. Why are you waging this war against us? The Empress was silent for a long moment before she answered. Because I learned that the galaxy is cruel to those who are weak, she said. Because I swore that I would never be helpless again after that night on the ice. I built my empire on strength and fear, because those were the only currencies that seemed to matter. But I made a second oath that night, Marcus Cole. An oath I have carried in my heart through all the years since we parted. What oath? Marcus, Asked Saritha reached out and took his hands in hers, just as she had done 20 years ago. Her chitin fingers gentle despite their strength. I swore that I would repay my debt to you, she said. I swore that I would find a way to honor the kindness you showed me. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything. She lifted his hands and pressed her forehead against them. The same gesture of profound meaning she had made when they parted. You gave me my life, and more than that. You gave me proof that mercy exists in a universe that had shown me only cruelty, conquered half the galaxy searching for that mercy again. And I never found it until today, when I watched you fight. When I saw you pulling your wounded from the wreckage with those same gentle hands that once healed me, I finally understood what I had been searching for all along. Marcus felt something shift in the air around them, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. What do you want from me? He asked. Saritha released his hands and stepped back, her posture shifting from that of a conqueror to something almost humble. I want you to help me find another way, she said. I want you to show me that strength and mercy can exist together. I want you to help me make peace behind Marcus. Commander Chun made a sound of disbelief, but he did not turn around. He was too busy watching the tears that ran from the Empress's compound eyes. Tears he had not known the Vethkari could shed. You would end this war? He asked, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. For you? Saritha replied. For the debt I owe you, and for the hope that your species has given me today. I will end this war, Marcus Cole, and I will build something better in its place. All I ask is that you help me remember how to be kind. The ceasefire took effect within the hour, spreading across the galaxy like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Vethkari warships that had been poised to destroy human colonies pulled back to their borders, and soldiers on 100 battlefields lowered their weapons in confusion and relief. Word spread quickly through the galactic compact that something unprecedented had occurred at Cauldrus Prime, that the unstoppable Empress had met a single human admiral and had somehow been moved to mercy. No one understood it, and that confusion would persist for years until the full story finally emerged. Marcus Cole stood in the great hall of the Vethkari flagship and looked around at the alien architecture with wonder that he could not quite suppress. The walls were covered in organic patterns that seemed to pulse with life, and the air smelled of something sweet that reminded him of flowers from Earth. You seem uncomfortable, Saritha observed from her throne, a smile playing at the edges of her alien face. I am trying to remember that a week ago your people were trying to kill me. Marcus replied, It makes trusting this situation somewhat difficult, and yet you came when I asked. Someone once told me that kindness matters, even when it seems impossible. The Empress laughed. a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. And Marcus found himself smiling despite everything. The negotiations have been going on for 3 days now, with representatives from humanity and the Galactic Compact meeting. Vethkari diplomats for the first time in recorded history. Progress was slow and difficult because there were centuries of distrust to overcome. But it was progress nonetheless. Saritha had insisted that Marcus serve as humanity's primary representative, and no one in human leadership had been brave enough to argue with the Empress who held their fate in her hands. "Your admirals think I have bewitched you somehow," she said. "They cannot comprehend why you would advocate for peace with an enemy who has caused such suffering. They will understand eventually." Marcus said, "Humans are slow learners, but we get there in the end. And what will you tell them when they ask why the Empress of the Vethkari suddenly decided to stop conquering?" "I will tell them the truth." Saritha tilted her head in that familiar gesture of curiosity. "Which truth?" "That 20 years ago, I helped a scared girl who needed kindness. And that girl grew up to remember. That is a very simple explanation for a very complicated situation. The best explanations usually are. The treaty was signed on the 7th day, in a ceremony that was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Saritha agreed to halt all expansion into compact space and to return the colonies her forces had captured during the war. And in exchange, she asked for only one thing. She asked for humanity's friendship. Her generals and advisors had argued against it with everything they had, calling her weak and foolish, and warning that the other species would see the Vethkari as vulnerable. But Saritha had silenced them with a single look that reminded everyone present why she was called the Undying. "This human taught me that power without mercy is hollow," she declared to her court. "I have conquered half the galaxy, and I have found it empty. I will not make enemies of the only species that has ever shown me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return." The word spread through both civilizations like wildfire, and something shifted in the way humans and Vethkari saw each other. It was not trust exactly, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that might one day become trust. On the final night before Marcus returned to human space, Saritha summoned him to her private chambers. She stood by a window that looked out at the stars, her silhouette outlined against the light of 1,000 distant suns. "I used to dream about you," she said without turning around. "After I returned to my people, after the wars began, I would dream about your hands and your voice and the way you looked at me without fear. I dreamed about you too." Marcus admitted, "I wondered what had become of the girl I saved, whether she had found happiness somewhere among the stars. I found power instead, and I convinced myself that it was the same thing." She turned to face him, and Marcus saw that. Her eyes were wet with tears again. "I was wrong. We all make mistakes," Marcus said gently. "What matters is what we do when we realize we were wrong." Saritha crossed the room until she stood before him, and she reached out to take his hands one final time. "You are old now," she said. "By human standards, you have more years behind you than ahead. That is true. I wish I had found you sooner. I wish I had not wasted so many years conquering worlds when I should have been searching for you. We cannot change the past," Marcus said. "We can only choose what to do with the future." The Empress nodded slowly and lifted his hands to her forehead in that gesture of ultimate respect and gratitude. "The debt is paid," she murmured, "but my gratitude will never end." "Then use it to build something better," Marcus replied. "Use it to show the galaxy that the Vethkari can be more than conquerors." "I will try, Marcus Cole. For you, I will try." She released his hands and stepped back, and something in her posture told him that this was goodbye. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Perhaps, if the universe is kind. And if it is not?" Saritha smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young girl he had saved all those years ago. "Then I will carry you in my heart until the stars grow cold, as I have carried you since the day we met." Marcus Cole returned to human space, a hero whose name would be remembered for generations. The Admiral, who had ended the greatest war humanity had ever faced through nothing more than compassion shown. To a dying girl decades before he lived to see the first joint patrols of human and Vethkari ships along the border. To see the first exchange of ambassadors, to see the first children from both species meet each other without fear. And when he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, the Empress of the Vethkari Dominion declared a day of mourning across her entire empire. She commissioned a statue of him to stand in the great plaza of her capital world, showing a young human medic kneeling beside a wounded alien girl with his hands extended in compassion. The inscription at the base read simply, "He taught us that kindness is the greatest strength," and throughout the galaxy, for centuries to come, parents told their children the story of Marcus Cole and the Empress Sarita, proof that a single act of mercy could change the course of history. The story always ended the same way, with the words the Empress had spoken on that battlefield so long ago. "I never forgot your hands." Human and humanity never forgot the lesson she had taught them in return, that even the most fearsome enemy might once have been a frightened child, who simply needed someone to show them that kindness still existed in the universe. That was the legacy of Marcus Cole, and it would endure long after the stars themselves had faded into darkness.